It's a beautiful day in November 2019 here at the Windsor Locks Senior Center, where Mr. Russell Meade is sharing his life story. Russ has been a resident of Windsor Locks since 1955. Born in East Windsor, Connecticut in 1925, Russ celebrated his 94th birthday this past July. One of 5 children and a family whose heritage included emigrating from Ireland, work on the Windsor Locks Canal, seasonal tobacco farming, and steady work in local factories, Russ was educated through the 10th grade in East Windsor schools, after which Russ decided to enlist in the United States Marine Corp, where his service to his country landed him at Guadalcanal in 1942 for a battle with Japanese forces, a 6-month ordeal in jungles and trenches, which turned out to be a pivotal victory for the Allied forces in the Pacific. Before ending his 4-year enlistment, Russ attained the rank of Staff Sergeant. After the war, Russ later made his home in Windsor Locks, where he and his wife, Kathryn, raised their family, which included 2 sons and 1 daughter.
Right.
You were starting to tell me about how your grandfather first arrived here.
Yeah, he came through Ellis Island because he was promised a job in Pine Meadow in Connecticut to build a canal, because further about a mile up the Connecticut River there's a big dam, and the passenger boats coming up, they couldn't go any further. They had to stop, and the people had to go by horse and wagon to go further up, like towards Springfield.
Yeah.
So they put everything together, kinda, and decided to build the canal. The dam is still there, and when you go across the river, where the boats would stop, the people would have to get off and stay overnight. They stayed in the warehouse across the river, where it's Warehouse Point.
That's where they get the name?
Right on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
It's still there. And they would pull all the people's equipment up into the upstairs, because the people had to stay down below overnight, because the boat couldn't go up to the river. They had to go by horse and wagon to go around the dam. Then there was a boat further up that they got onto, and that kept them going up to Vermont.
Yeah.
And this was a big difficulty for everybody.
What was your grandfather's name, by the way?
James Meade.
James Meade.
Yeah, James. And I don't know who originally determined that we would build a canal, because a lot of thought had to go into it first, to go around the dam. And so the Germans did the engineering mathematics to it. Then the Italians fed the Irishmen, and the Irishmen did the work.
Hey.
And they dug the marble out of the river to make the canal, the walls for the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to build the openings to let water into it. And if there's too much, they could let it out. So they built them on both ends of the canal. It's 4 miles. And they both open up. They can either fill it more or delete it a little bit if they can. If there's been a hurricane or something, water, so they can lower the canal.
And what do they call those? Where they opened up those gates?
Yeah, and the one is the one down here is go down Main Street, you do go down Elm Street and turn right, and it's not too far down on the left-hand side, like near where the train station is
Yeah.
now down there.
Yeah.
That the gate can open and close.
Were those the locks?
Yeah, they're locks.
What
Yeah.
they call the locks?
That's what they call the locks.
Yeah.
And there's another set of them further up, about 4 miles, on the other side of the dam that's in the river.
Yeah.
And so the Germans did the mathematics of it, the Irishmen did the work, and the Italians fed them.
Now, did your grandfather tell you about all this?
No,
Did you know your grandfather?
I kind of, I was a little kid,
Yeah.
and I did know when he passed away, but right at the moment I can't remember, I forgot.
You were a young child at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And they lived on, he built the house on First Street, and it was the second house. Now it's the third house. Just recently, past few years, they built another, there was a big space between the street and where the first house was. And they,
Do you remember going inside your grandfather's house?
I don't really remember ever going there. I guess we did. My parents did, because we lived in East Windsor Hill. And
Oh, okay.
my grandmother lived, there was 2 great big buildings. The Hartford Seminary was in East Windsor Hill, and the 2 great big buildings, brick buildings, facing them. The one on the left was the education building, and there's a little ways. Then there was another great big building, and that was the dormitories where the students all lived. And then they, because of difficulties in the winter where they had school mostly, they went by horse and wagons going there, so they built to the seminary, they built these 2 buildings, great big brick buildings. Then the seminary was built further down in Hartford
Yes.
because it was too detached from Hartford for the people to have to come by horse, and the students go by horse and wagon and all that.
So are the original buildings still over there?
One of them is.
Oh.
And we lived down further, and I had an older brother, me, and then a sister. I had another sister, and the house was too small for all of us to be living there, and we moved up to what was the dormitory to the seminary.
Oh.
The seminary became a nightclub called the New England Nut Club. It was
The New England Nut Club.
The New England Nut Club. That was the educational building, and beside it my grandparents lived on one side and we lived on the other side. And my father worked for the Maloney family on Sullivan Avenue. You go down Sullivan Avenue, the big farm, the first one on the left, that was the Maloney tobacco farm.
Tobacco.
Yeah, and my father and my uncle, his brother, the both of them lived there, and they would go by horse and wagon to go to Maloney's and come back. But there was no water inside. There was a pump outside, and the big building, other big wooden building, was for the horses. And then they weren't using horses anymore. They're using tractors and Model T Fords.
Yeah.
So they built a big brick, like a big brick garage, and that's where they would put the vehicles and farm vehicles in there for the winter. Because after they got the tobacco all down, there was nothing else to do, so they put all the vehicles inside there. But I lived there for about 5 or 6 years, and I went to Ellsworth School, and I used to take the trolley car was across the street, and the trolley went down, and that took all the students.
Where was the Ellsworth School?
It's down on the right-hand side. It's still a school. It's on the right-hand side, further down
In East Windsor?
in East Windsor.
Okay.
And the Pritchard family still lives in a great big structure right beside the Ellsworth School. And it's still a school.
Mm.
And the
Now, was
trolley-
that grade school?
It's a grade school.
Yeah.
Well, grade to 1st to 8.
1 through 8.
Yeah. And
Now, before you tell me more about schooling, I'd like to hear about your schooling. Tell me your brothers and sisters' names.
my brother's name was Kenneth, and he was 3 years older than me, and I'm Russell. My sister is 2 years younger, was Constance, and call her Connie. I never heard anybody calling her Constance, but her name was Constance. Her nickname was Connie. And a couple of years later, Muriel, my sister Muriel, came into the being, and we were closer together, and we were good friends all our lives, even after we had all moved up here. And then I had another sister quite a few years later. I think it was kind of a physical mistake, but she came into the world.
Yeah.
And
And her name?
her name was Barbara.
Barbara.
And there was not enough room for everybody. And my father wanted to, couldn't work in the winter
Yeah.
because there was no jobs. So he heard that there was some jobs open in the woolen mills in Rockville. So he took the trolley car up there and did some looking around, and he was offered a job
Good.
in the Springville. You familiar with any of them?
I
The
remember them.
The
Some of those
Springville
mills
Mill
in Rockville.
on West Main Street.
Yeah.
Yep, and he was offered a job there, every day, regular
Full-time.
work, all through winter, fall, and so
Full-time.
my father
Good.
says,
I'm guessing that might have been during the Depression,
yes,
because you were born in what year?
1925,
And now you're talking about your grade school years, which would have
Yeah.
been about in the middle of the 30s.
well, I started school when I was 6 years old
Mm-hmm.
at Ellsworth School,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to 3rd grade, and we moved to Rockville, and I entered St. Bernard's School, and I graduated from St. Bernard's,
Oh,
and it was in about 1936 or 37, I guess.
I see.
And my father was working in the Springville Mill, and he worked there all his life.
Well,
Yeah. And it was better than living in East Windsor Hill, where we had no electricity, water was only outdoors, there was a pump inside, but
Yeah.
that was all.
so you eventually moved to Rockville? where
We
your
moved
dad
to
worked?
Rockville.
I see.
Yeah.
And you spent a good part of your life in Rockville?
Yeah, yeah. And then there was a lot of trouble going on in the world, and I was in my second year, excuse me, in high school. And Jesus, it wasn't very interesting. And so there was advertising.
You mean the studies in school weren't very interesting?
No,
Schoolwork?
they were They were repetitious.
Yeah.
For, like, I studied Latin, English, algebra, and another class. And it was all about having the education in those subjects. So after the second year, I went into the Marine Corps. I went to Hartford.
While you were in high school?
Yeah.
So did you finish high school?
No,
Okay.
not there.
After 2 years
Yeah,
at St. Bernard's?
at not St. Bernard, grade school. I
Oh.
went to Rockville High School.
Rockville High. After 2
Rockville
years,
High.
you
Yeah.
decided to enlist?
Yeah, I enlisted in the Marine Corps and went to Paris Island, got training.
Can you tell me, why did you choose the Marines?
Well, the Army, you had to be 18,
Okay.
and I was 17. And I didn't feel like wanting to go cross the ocean on boats and all that, so I went in the Marine Corps, and they would accept me.
And they did?
And I passed the physical,
Uh-huh.
so they sent me to Paris Island. I graduated from Paris Island, and then they were forming, and I took an aptitude as to what they felt they could train me for. And I had gave them an impression that I liked fixing things. So they got a group of us together at Marine Corps base at Quantico and at Turner Field, which now we're not allowed to, nobody's allowed there. That's, the President's fleet is based at Turner Field. And we had a reunion for all the guys that were at Quantico. We weren't allowed to go to Turner Field because the President's fleet's there and nobody's allowed to go through the gate unless you have a reason to be there.
Is it still called Turner Field?
It's still Turner Field.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's in Virginia?
Yeah.
Yeah, south of Washington, D.C.
Marine Corps base.
Yes,
Right across the Potomac River.
yeah.
And the airfield is there, Turner Field, and Marine Corps station is all there.
Yeah.
And the FBI basic training has their section of it where they train, their people train shooting, all different weapons and all that sort of thing. But
Now, when you enlisted, did you know anybody else who enlisted with you
nobody
from your
enlisted.
town?
No, the other guy that was with me didn't want to go into the Marine Corps because that's all, it's going to be rifle and
Yeah.
on the ground and all that. And he wanted to go in the Navy
Uh-huh,
and go aboard boats.
uh-huh.
And that didn't appeal to me. Out at sea with a submarine come chasing you.
Yeah. Now,
So-
you mentioned reunions. You mentioned reunions of the soldiers that were in Quantico.
Yeah,
Did you ever go to one of those reunions?
yes, yes I did.
Did you go to more than one?
Yes, we did. We would have one every year for quite a while until the people attracted to it became less and less.
Yeah. When was the last time you went to one? Do you recall?
Well, we stopped having them about 10 years ago.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
But then, while I was there, I took an aptitude test and passed it to be an airplane mechanic.
Mhm.
So they gave me a test and I passed it, and they sent me and about 10 other guys to the Jacksonville Naval Air Training School in Jacksonville, Florida. And we were there for 10 years,
10 years?
not 10 years, 7 months.
I got you.
And we graduated. You had to pass a graduation test. And in Jacksonville, we stayed there for a little while afterwards, working on airplanes. I think it was mostly just for us to exhibit what it's going to be like.
Now, was the war going on at this time?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
the war had already started.
Yeah, well, the war started when I was still in Paris Island.
Uh-huh.
So they taught us how to, okay, you guys got to learn how to shoot straight. And here's how you fix a bayonet and all that sort of thing.
So before you enlisted, had the war started?
No.
So you enlisted, and there wasn't a war, but you're in
There
basic
wasn't.
training and the war had started.
Yeah, yeah.
What were your thoughts about that?
Well, this is what happened, this is what happened. You know, we'll do what we have to do.
Yeah. How about your parents? What were their thoughts about their boy being in the Marines and
They
the
were
war
kind of
starting?
concerned. Yeah,
Did you write? Did
they
you,
would write to me,
They would write to you?
and where am I at, you know, and what am I doing?
Yeah.
Then I got transferred to outside of San Diego to an air base called, it was on North Island in San Diego. And they moved us further up to another airport on land. And we formed a squadron. There was 220 of us. And pilots that just come out of flight training,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them they were the NAPs, Naval Air Pilots. They were enlisted men, and there was 250 some of us, and we were practicing there. The pilots were practicing with the airplanes, and we were fixing them and working on them with superiors, not doing any of the work, but seeing how we do it and do it right, kind of thing.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden our air base was closed and we were getting ready to leave. We didn't know where we were going.
Didn't know where you were going.
And one day they closed all the gates except one, and there was a big bus and a big truck with benches in it. And we got there and all of our equipment, and it took us down to San Diego Harbor, and then we were put on a transport, troop transport. And
You still
we
didn't know
know-
to where?
we didn't know where we were going.
Oh. Wow.
And the people who were the parts of the crew, we asked them, we took off in the ocean, and off we go. Where are we going? He said, they don't know. The people that are running the ship, they do, but we don't know. All we're doing is running the boat. And it got to be kind of boring because of day after day. And we never stopped anywhere for about a month. And we wound up, and everything was code name. We went to SPAN.
SPAM?
Yep, which was code name for New Caledonia, Noumea and New Caledonia. That's where we were dumped off. And we were in Noumea for a while. And then we were put on another transport, and we spent a couple of weeks at sea, and we wound up in Buttons. That was the code name. We were in Buttons. And it was Espiritu Santos in the New Hebrides.
Yes.
You ever hear the New Hebrides?
I have, yes.
We were in the Espiritu Santos. And they had an airport, and our airplanes were brought to the airport, and we get accustomed to operating under the weather conditions. Then one time, all of a sudden, one morning we were told to get all our gear together, sharpen our weapons, and we're leaving. We're getting on another ship. And
Well, let me just ask you a question. You knew at this point that Pearl Harbor had already happened,
We had heard about it,
You only, had
yeah.
only heard about it. So
We don't know much about
I
it,
got you, yeah.
because
So,
we went by Hawaii.
yeah.
We didn't stop.
Yeah, so this is probably early 1942, since Pearl Harbor was in
Yeah,
December
it was
41.
1941.
So early
1942
42.
is later because I was 7 months in school
Yeah,
and through 1942.
yeah. So I'm just trying to imagine what's going on in your mind and all your fellow Marines.
At the
Were you
time,
aware of the Japanese?
we didn't know where
as
they were.
You weren't aware of
No.
them as being, the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy, and that you might be facing them as an enemy?
We didn't know much about them.
Wow, okay, all right, thank you.
Because they had no papers, no
Yeah.
newspaper, no radio, just somebody else tell us
I
what
got you.
what the conditions in the nations were.
Wow.
And we got to this island to get off, but because of the reef goes 1,000 feet out under the ocean, so the transport had to stop. We got into landing barges, we went down rope ladders into a landing barge, and we on this place and it was hot, and mosquitoes was tremendous, and we were in Cactus, and it took us to a place where the Seabees were finishing an airport. They had, when this was a thick jungle, we had to follow, there was 4 rivers, the Lunga and the Matanacal, and we had to follow them to know where we were going, and if you turn around, how to get back, because you get out in the jungle and turn around, you had no idea what way to go. It was so thick. And what was disturbing me, the snakes were about 10 feet tall, 10 feet long, and they lived up in the coconut trees. And the crocodiles weighed about 1,000, and the wild boar weighed about 2,000, and they had the big spears. But we were on Cactus, and we had to get our rifles ready and everything else, because the Japanese were on the other side of it, and they wanted the airport. There was no other place to have an airport on Cactus. And the Seabees had made this airport, and they smoothed it, and they covered it all with Marston mats. You know the Marston mat?
Mhm.
Okay. Because of bombs or shells hit it and blew holes in it, in what they made the airport, it was,
Wouldn't be able to
you
use it.
couldn't use it.
Yeah.
So the Marston mats took all the blows, and the Seabees had bunches of them, these mats, and they were big. And there was a kind of a device that picked them up and would take them over and take off the one that was damaged, put it on. Airport could fly again.
Wow.
And we were at Cactus, and there was in December when we were put ashore. I find this out later. We didn't know what the month was or what time. It didn't matter.
Oh, so that's probably December of 41.
No, 42.
Oh, 42?
42.
Okay.
So we were at Cactus, and that was Guadalcanal, and we stayed there, and we launched our aircraft to bomb enemy ships. And then there was an aircraft carrier that had a lot of damage, and a lot of their crew people were injured, I guess, some killed and all that. We never got much information about it.
Now, you clarify something for me. You just mentioned Guadalcanal in
Guadalcanal.
the context of Cactus.
Yeah, the code name was Cactus.
Oh, for Guadalcanal?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
Guadalcanal.
thank you for
Code name
clarifying
was
that.
Cactus.
Okay,
And the Navajo Indian group went to an island further up, and they would send messages down when enemy ships would be coming, and barges would be coming carrying troops, and they would let everybody hear it, but nobody could understand them, except the Navajo Indians that were with us, that we had.
I've heard
And they
about
said,
that.
we gotta get ready, get down by the shore, and the enemy is bringing down troops. And we would have to shoot them.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, they
Yeah.
didn't know.
So you mentioned December, and
We
now
would be hiding. Yeah, December.
42, but when did you arrive there on Guadalcanal? Do you recall what month, or was that when you arrived?
We got there, I think it was early, about maybe October and November.
Okay.
We were dumped off there.
Yeah,
And we were put aboard, then the aircraft carrier, they had painted out all the names on the bow and up on the smokestack. A couple of guys every once in a while would paint out the number and paint a different number on the smokestack. And when we were first put aboard the carrier, it had number 16. And after a while, and don't know how long it was, because we had no calendars, no clocks, and they painted out and they painted another number, and found out later that the Japs changed their mind, because now there's another carrier, there's more than what they can handle, so it was the same one that they were seeing.
oh,
It's the same one. We find all that out later.
yeah, oh, I see, yeah.
And we were aboard a carrier, and I was a anti-aircraft batteryman, a 40 millimeter quad mount. And there was one incident, there was a TBF coming in for a flight of TBFs took off, and they were, later when they come back, they were recovering the torpedo. They did their mission. And one of them was coming back, and he was turning real tight right around the approach of the deck, and he had his hook down. And our quad mount was right near the entrance. We were on the second floor, but our shoulders and head were about level with the flight deck, so we could see the airplanes coming. And all of a sudden, we saw him still turning, and he had his hook down, and he shouldn't have been, he was in the wrong position. Anyways, and the arresting wires were extended. The airplane caught them and stopped the airplane and yanked it backwards, and it dropped down. And what I'm getting to is where our position was the entry door to the ready room. And pretty soon, 3 guys were coming across, and they were coming into the ready room. They were the crew for the TBF. One of the guys said, "Boy, that was a pretty harsh landing there, wasn't it? How'd you get to do that?" So the pilot says, "You see the airplane there? It's all right. There's 3 of us, the crew. We're walking across it, and nothing wrong with us." Yeah, you see that, yeah? That was a good landing. And he kept on going, they went to the ready room.
You never forgot that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then after a while, they needed our squadron was a dive bomber squadron, the Douglas SPDs. And we were put ashore again. We were put back to Guadalcanal, so our airplanes and TBS they got involved in the battle for the Coral Sea, and we won.
Yeah.
The dive bombers and the torpedo planes, yeah, we won it.
Now that airfield,
Henderson Field?
Henderson Field.
Yeah, that was a Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
They named that Henderson. Named after Lofty Henderson. He was a Marine Corps pilot killed at Midway. And they named, when they built the airfield at Cactus, they named it Henderson Field after him, in honor of him. So, and it's called that to this day. Another thing, the Pope, a few years ago, the Pope had a reason for him to go to China. And Alitalia flies the Pope any place he wants to go. And he wanted to go to China. So, and they were flying to, I think it was 747. And it was too far, even with a full load, it was too far away. So they made all kinds of arrangements, drawn, okay, here's a place with an airfield long enough so we get fuel. And I read about this, and they kind of made arrangements for a tanker to come near, what we would call a Cactus, near Guadalcanal, because they were going to land there to refuel the Pope's airplane.
Oh.
And they did. He landed there, and the tanker was able to pump fuel into tanks and go fuel the airplane, and they did. Yeah.
And you boys found out that the Pope.
Yeah, we found out
that the Pope was on that plane.
That was many years later.
Yeah.
That the people that were harvesting cactus, they had cargo airplanes to come in, so the airfield was still being maintained.
Yeah.
And there's a building that's built because there's only natives that do live there. They don't relate to anybody. So the companies that were harvesting the coconuts, they built a building to harvest for the guys to stay in. And it's air conditioned, had running water.
Under civilization. Yeah.
It still is the Marsden mats on the airfield.
Yeah.
Because there's earthquakes. Because sometimes we'd be doing something, laying on the ground, and the whole place would begin to rattle, and there were pyres sticking up in the air. They were the volcano.
Oh yeah.
And the lava would flow down it.
You saw that?
Yeah, saw that. Yeah, and you'd hear it first.
Wow.
And the whole island would shake. And one time we were down by the shore, waiting to see there was some enemy ships coming, and where they were headed, if they were coming to us or if they were going to another island. And we were hiding in the jungle, just waiting for them.
You were hiding in the jungle?
Yeah, well, unless you're out along the harbor, you're hiding, you're in the jungle.
So you felt safer in the jungle?
Yeah, nobody can find you unless they stumble upon you.
Except you've got the mosquitoes and the snakes and the boars.
Snakes, yeah.
Oh
and
my.
The crocodiles.
Oh
just,
my.
Just one description that is coming back to my mind. I was going through this area that had been bombed, and it was kind of an open area, and there's a Jap soldier, and he was laying sideways, but he was bent backwards. And I didn't want to go beyond him and him see me and pull out a weapon and shoot me. So I went up behind him. And I could see that something's got to be wrong with him. And I looked around in front of him, and he was conscious because his eyes were looking at me. And so I thought, maybe he's got a weapon that he's laying on. When somebody goes by, he's going to take it and shoot him. So I kind of kicked him over. His spine was sticking out. A piece of a shell of a bomb or a shell from a warship had hit him in the back, and it broke his backbone. And he was still alive, but he couldn't move. And so I kicked him back over again that's where he was. And it wasn't, I didn't get going too far. And because we always followed a river. If you get out into the jungle and you have no way of knowing where backwards for you is, so you stay along the river and you know how to go one direction and go the other way. And I was waiting and a crocodile came out and it went across, went over, and it grabbed him by the feet and it dragged him down to the river, and it bit his legs off and then bit the rest of them and had him in the river.
Wow. And
that's where crocodiles would drag even dead guys. I saw them dragging dead guys, our guys, Japs, drag them into the river, and then that's how they ate them. So, in that kind of an atmosphere, it wasn't very comfortable. You carry a loaded weapon, and you don't know what you're going to shoot, but you shoot something.
So let me ask you a question, just from somebody who's done a little bit of reading. When you hear them describe Guadalcanal as the first major offensive victory for the Allied forces in the Pacific.
We found that out later.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you realize you were in such a historic battle?
No.
Even when you won it, did you realize you even were able to declare victory? Your forces, your fellow soldiers, did it feel like a victory when you were done?
No, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
We had, as a group, we stayed closer to the airport, but we would, if the enemy was trying to come out of the jungle, it's terrible, but we'd shoot them. And that's how we were surviving. But when our supply ship was coming, it got in the harbor, it was bringing all our supplies and everything, all our new food and all, and even all ammunition. The enemy got into the harbor, the enemy sank it, and we were left with nothing. So, that's
So
what
approximately when do you recall that you were able to leave Guadalcanal for the last time? Because you were back and forth between the carrier and being sent to shore and into the jungles, and then back onto the carrier.
No, we only went down to carrier once.
Oh, you only went on there once?
Yes. Yeah.
So most of the time, during those months, my readings tell me that the Battle of Guadalcanal was from August of 42
August
to February of 43.
Yes.
And you got there around October or so, maybe?
We didn't know what a day it was, what month it was.
But do you recall when you left?
Yeah, when we were leaving, we got aboard this troop ship. And across the aisle, across the bay, in the harbor across, was Savo Island. And there was a PT boat squadron based over there, because there was no place for them at Guadalcanal. because the reef was 1,000 feet under the ocean, and a boat couldn't come in. It was harsh. You couldn't bang your way through. You could bang your way through it, but the PT boats stayed over at Savo Island, and there was PT 109. Kennedy was the commander of it, but the PT boats were made of plywood, and they had 2 Allison airplane engines in it for power, and they were overpowered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the PT boats would go out and they would fire at enemy ships coming in. They had to slow down to come between Savo Island and Guadalcanal, and the PT boat would go out, and they carried torpedoes,
Yeah.
and they would torpedo the ship. They would Jap ships bring supplies for their own troops.
Right. So were they part of the safeguarding you
Yeah.
as you made passage from Guadalcanal, away from Guadalcanal?
Yeah, to
Yeah.
get away from it, yeah.
You remember leaving it for the last time, that you knew your mission and your work there was done and you're going somewhere else now?
We were leaving, yeah, yeah.
But did you know where you were going next?
No, had no idea where we were going or what for.
Yeah.
We carried our weapons, but we didn't have much equipment. We were down to just what we were wearing. Our clothes were ruined, and we were being brought back. We didn't know it. It was a month or so later, and we were coming into this harbor, and it was San Francisco Bay.
And you didn't know that that's where you were? Oh, wow.
We didn't know it.
So what did that feel like, though, when you did see?
When we pulled into to where the ship was, and they wouldn't let anybody near us. They had a line of ropes for us to go between to get cleared through, because you couldn't carry a lot of things. You couldn't carry enemy rifles or anything like that.
So was your first realization that you were coming into San Francisco, the view of the Golden Gate Bridge, or how did you realize it was
We
San
went
Francisco?
under a bridge. We didn't know it was the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Or San Francisco, but
Until
we
you got-
knew we were in the United States somewhere,
Yeah,
because we've been at sea for a month.
wow.
But
So this is probably now March or April
yeah,
of
Yeah.
43.
yeah,
and
came
you're
back.
coming into San Francisco.
Yeah,
Did you think you were going home?
well, we didn't know where we were headed when we were going ashore, but they wouldn't let anybody talk to us.
Yeah.
We had to go to a line to a bus that was picking us up, all of us. We couldn't talk to anybody as to where we were. And we didn't know it was Guadalcanal, we were in Cactus,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
But you knew you must have known you survived hell.
yeah, yeah. Like sometimes I make a short talk, I say, the day I get to heaven, to St. Peter, I can yell, a Guadalcanal Marine is here, sir, and I've already served my time in hell.
Did you write that? Did you compose that?
I figured that out, got that myself.
God
I
bless you.
didn't read that.
No, you
I
made that up yourself.
myself, yeah.
You like poetry.
But, like, gee, the place was full of the snakes
Yeah.
and the crocodiles, and they ate guys. They dragged them to the river, and they ate them in 3 bites.
Yeah. But now that you're in San Francisco, and
Yeah.
they haven't told you where you're going next, but at some point they did, or you at some point you realized where you're going. The war is still going on.
We went to it, yeah, oh yeah. We went to some air base and they gave us all new gear, new clothes and all that. And they gave us a month to leave. So I came home.
Good for you.
Got a ticket on the train, came from San Francisco right into Hartford.
Did your parents know you were coming home? Were you able to contact them?
Yeah, I wrote them a letter.
From California?
Yeah.
Yeah, they must have been so happy.
There was a base that we stayed at for a little while. Then I got sent to El Toro, down by Santa Ana. It's closed now, but it was a big air base. And the field there now, Camp Pendleton, was about 50 miles away from us.
Yeah.
They got their own airfield.
Let me ask you, did your brother also enlist?
Yeah, well, he was drafted.
And he was drafted?
And he went to Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, he was in the Army.
And he's your older brother?
Older, 4 years.
So did he go in before you enlisted, your brother, or around the same time?
Right around the same time.
Right around the same time.
He was drafted, yeah.
Drafted into the Army?
Yeah, into the Army.
And he went to Europe?
Yeah, he was an artilleryman.
Okay.
In Europe.
All right.
Yeah.
So your parents have both boys on opposite sides of the world.
Yeah.
In the middle of a world war.
Both ends of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you did what you had to do to stay alive.
So from the West Coast, Santa Ana and El
Santa
Toro,
Ana,
from
and
there,
San Diego.
were you ever dispatched or deployed to another combat site?
No.
You didn't see any more combat after that?
No.
Good for you.
I was asked to transfer into this other dive bomber squadron. And so I went to the first sergeant and I told him, I don't want to go with you. You're going overseas, you're leaving, and I don't want to. So he says, okay, I won't accept you.
Yeah.
So he didn't, so he stayed at El Toro in Santa Ana.
That's where you stayed?
That's where I stayed.
And what was your rank at that point?
I was promoted to staff sergeant.
You were?
Yeah. And then after the war, got out of the Corps, and a couple of years later, the Korean War was building up, and I didn't want to go back into the Marine Corps. And I knew some guys around Rockville, they had been being called back for active duty in the Marine Corps and some in the Navy. And I didn't want to go back. So I joined the Connecticut Air Guard at Bradley. And I was working there. About 2 months later, I got a notice to report to the Marine Corps recruiting office in the Hartford Post Office. So, oh no. So I went to my first sergeant in the Air Guard, and I says, hey, look what I got to leave. And he says, do you wanna? And I said, no, I don't want to do that again. And he said, okay, give me that. I'll take care of this. You're not going anywhere. So I said, okay, great. So I didn't go.
So, but you stayed in the Guard?
I stayed in the Guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stayed in the Guard. And
how long did you stay in the Guard?
I stayed there 30 years.
Wow.
And retired. We were at Brainerd, and then we moved to Bradley.
Yeah.
And
so you were 30 years in the Guard,
yep,
plus your 4 years in the Marines?
Yeah, in the Marine Corps.
34 years?
Yeah.
God bless you.
And I retired from the Air Guard, and they added 4 years in my retirement. So.
Yeah.
But I lived through it. I wasn't going to be a hero.
Yeah,
You know,
were a hero.
Unless
you are a hero.
For somebody to shoot me, their bullet had to go like that and then go like that,
Yeah.
but no way.
Well, you know what, we're kind of like at a point in your life story where the war is going to be behind you. Somehow you made it to Windsor Locks, Connecticut.
Yeah,
And what I'd like to do is, if it's all right with you, if we could get together again and pick up from there and tell me a little bit about the rest of your life. You know, you got married, you had kids,
Yeah,
you
well,
got a job, a career,
and
you
I was
landed in Windsor Locks.
I was at Windsor Locks. We were first at Brainerd, and the airport was too short, so they moved us to Bradley. And so after a couple of winters, there was a whole group of new houses being built in Windsor Locks. So
Whereabouts? What's
up by Route 75.
Up by Route 75.
Yeah, they cut down all the trees.
Are you talking about over Litchfield Drive?
Litchfield, Ash Drive.
Yeah, Ash, the southwest
Ash.
part of town.
Yeah.
Southwest part of town.
And
Yeah.
we
Denslow.
bought a house, Denslow Street, yeah.
Denslow Street. Yeah.
And Halfway House
Halfway
Road.
House. Okay, I know what you're
And-
talking about.
The house was, we bought a house, was $12,000.
Mm.
Been there ever since.
That's where you live now?
That's where I live now.
What street? On Ash?
No, I live on Palm Drive,
Palm Drive.
yeah. As you go down Ash Drive off Old County Road, it's the first road on the left, but it's a dead end.
Mm-hmm. So the house was probably built in the 50s?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
so. But I don't really relate what I'm relating to you. I don't to too many people, because I don't want them to think, geez, he was out there shooting people and killing them. Well,
I
at the
understand.
position, you kind of had to,
Yeah.
if you were going to see another day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Can you tell me about your parents?
well, my mother was born on Worthington Street in Springfield. My father was born in East Windsor Hill.
What are their names? Their names.
My mother, her name was her maiden name was Marjorie Church, and she had a couple of sisters. Everybody else lived in Hartford, and my mother and father met, and he was working on a tobacco farm in East Windsor Hill, the Maloney Farm. It's on Sullivan Avenue.
Mm.
But then there was no work in the winter. So he got a job in Rockville, the textile factories, and he was a boiler attender for heating and producing hot water. And he worked there just about almost all his life.
Is that James?
No, his name was Cornelius.
Cornelius.
James was his brother,
Okay.
James Meade. My father's name was Cornelius, and they called him Carney. So I don't know
Yeah.
if somebody has ever see that.
Uh-huh. So any special memories of your mom?
She was very pleasant, and she had a sister and a brother who lived in Hartford, and they used to relate with each other, and sometimes they would hop on a bus and come to Rockville where we lived, and then later, after that, I wanted to become an authorized airplane mechanic. So I went to Roosevelt School of Aeronautics in Long Island, and I became a federal licensed airplane A&E mechanic, aircraft and engines.
So this was in the 50s,
This is in the 50s, yes.
or maybe late 40s. It was
Yeah.
after the war.
It was after the war.
Yeah.
I was a mechanic
Uh-huh.
during the war in the Marine Corps, among other things.
Yeah.
Carried a rifle also.
Yeah.
And that was more important
Yeah.
than an airplane on Guadalcanal,
Yeah.
having your rifle or something.
Yeah.
But
So when you came home from the war and after your enlistment,
yeah,
is that when you went to Long Island for schooling?
went to Long Island, Roosevelt School of Aeronautics, and I got my federal license, and then the Korean War started to generate a lot of interest, and I did not want to go back into the Marine Corps. For many reasons, I didn't want to. So some of the friends around from Rockville who were in the Corps, they were getting recalled, and I didn't want to go back into the Marine Corps. So I joined the Air Guard, which was at Brainerd Field at the time. And about 2 months later, I get a notice that I'm to report to the post office in Hartford. So I'm being recalled back into active duty into the Marine Corps. So I went to the first sergeant with this, and he said, "Do you want to go back?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Okay, I'll take this, then forget about it. You're not going to be going back into the Marine Corps. You're staying with us." So I did.
Good.
But it isn't that I didn't like the Corps, but I didn't want to go back into combat for many reasons. And we were at Brainerd, and then we were getting new airplanes. We were getting an F-86 fighter from North American F-86, the Saberjet. And Brainerd was too short for it, for the runway. They couldn't lengthen it because of the highway is on one side, Connecticut River's on the other. The runway couldn't be extended. So we moved to Bradley. And the F-86s were brought there, and they landed there. They were ferried, brand new from the factory in California. And driving from Rockville to Windsor Locks every day, on a good day it was a nice drive, but sometimes in the winter I was very late because of the condition of the road, and then sometimes I couldn't leave to go home to drive. They're all side roads to get to Rockville.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to stay at Bradley, stay overnight. A lot of other guys did too. So they decided we got to move to Windsor Locks. So we did.
You were married at that time?
We got married. Yeah, we lived in Rockville, and I enjoyed living in Rockville.
Yeah. Do you recall what year you got married?
No, 1948, I think.
Oh, okay.
In 1948. And
So you decided to move to Windsor Locks?
yeah, we decided to move to Windsor Locks, and my lovely wife agreed, okay, because I said it's a very difficult drive, and every winter it's going to be the same. But we didn't want to rent a place. We were going to buy one, because I had a military approval to buy homes, and then some people who lived here told us about a new development on the other end of Windsor Locks. Jarvis was building a whole group of homes, and so we went up and inquired and got involved in it. And there was a couple of houses that were finished. They were building them like all the base at the time, all the cellars. Then they built the walls. Then the people were all doing the same job. That would be easier for them and have all the same products. And so they had some of them finished that were for sale. And for honorably discharged veterans It was $12,000, no money down, and $12,000,
Wow.
$65 a month. So I said, okay, we drove over and we looked at them. And those that were finished, there was one that was open for the public. And my wife said, this is nice. So I said, okay. So we told the guy, we're going to buy this. And we did. We bought it. And we moved in there in just about 1955. And we're still there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still living in the same place.
And where in Windsor Locks is that?
Palm Drive. It's up at the end by Old County Road. You know what Old County Road is?
Yeah,
Ash Drive. You know Ash Drive?
indeed. Yeah.
Well, on the end of Ash Drive, Palm Drive is a dead end. Pine Drive is the next street over. But we live on Pine Drive, Palm Drive.
Mhm.
And
Quiet neighborhood, huh? Quiet neighborhood?
oh yeah, it still is.
Mm-hmm. Nice, nice.
Other than airplanes, because runway 6 and 33,
Yeah,
the approach comes just about over the house, but
yeah. But
I
we
was
don't
in
notice that.
aviation.
They say it's like the rabbits on the airfield. They don't hear it.
No,
Windsor Locks, we don't hear it.
no. So I don't care. The airplane's
Yeah,
overhead.
That's right.
And he's doing on a correct approach, good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was easy for there sometimes when, before I had a snow plow, I had a shovel. But sometimes in the morning there was so much snow I couldn't drive out. So I would walk out to Old County Road, which was always plowed, and I would walk to the hangar.
Wow.
Yeah. And then at night I would walk back home. It wasn't very far.
Yeah.
It was kind of dangerous at times because there was no sidewalks. But you did it kind of carefully. And
Yeah.
so, but I got to work a lot of times. Half the guys couldn't get there or they were stuck trying to get there. And we were in the north end of Bradley. And we stayed there for many years. And then we moved over to Granby because we got F-100s and the hangar was too small to accommodate them all. So a new hangar was built for us over in East Granby. And it's still there. The guard eventually moved from the Route 75 hangar of Bradley over to the East Granby side. And it was bigger and up to date, and a lot of electronics were installed and all that. So I stayed there until I retired.
Wow. Which was when? Which was when? When did you retire?
I'm trying to think. I retired 1976, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I was 72 when I retired.
Mm-hmm.
It was time for me to quit,
Mm-hmm.
to retire. And so I did.
So that was full-time for you? Full-time work?
Yeah, yeah. It was full-time, and on drill weekends, it was on weekends too.
Yeah.
But the finances were doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Got paid well for it.
And a good education too. I imagine the technology was changing rapidly over
Yes.
those years.
From propeller
Yeah.
to turbine engines. And then we had turboprop airplanes. Not for the squadron, was for the executives.
Mm-hmm.
Turboprops. And DC-3s, did you ever hear of DC-3s?
I remember.
Yeah, we had two DC-3s for people carrying important people
Mm-hmm.
going someplace that they had to go. So I stayed there until then.
So how about telling us a little bit about the family you raised. When was the first one born before you got to Windsor Locks, or?
Yes, they were born in Rockville Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The three sons, my two sons and my lovely daughter,
Mm-hmm.
they were born in Rockville.
Mm-hmm.
But my younger son, he wasn't even walking when we moved to Windsor Locks.
Mm-hmm.
And you're familiar with Rockville Hospital?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the house was George Maxwell's mansion originally. And when he moved out, they took the house over, and the hospital originally was up beyond Union Street. And they moved the hospital down they converted his house into the Rockville Hospital. And my two sons were born there, same room. But then now it's mostly just for executive and paperwork building, the original hospital. Now a new modern day, up-to-date brick hospital been built in the backyard of Maxwell's house.
Mm-hmm. So they were toddlers and maybe early kindergarten or first grade by the time you got to Windsor Locks?
Yes, yes.
So they obviously went to the Windsor Locks school system.
The school system now the high school was where the town hall is. And beside it was the grade school. But the grade school's been just demolished.
Mm-hmm.
When they built and there was one on South Elm Street. Now it's a elderly retirement center. That used to was an 8th grade school, and my son graduated from it. And rather than take a bus, a lot of times he walked to school. And there were sidewalks all the way, so that was all right. And
did they have a sports program then at that time in the schools? Did they have sports programs?
yeah, they did. My older son the grade school was the school beside what now is the town hall. That was the high school, and if you're looking at it, at the left side was an 8th grade school.
Mm-hmm.
And the building on the right was a nursing center, nurses center. And it wasn't until a short time ago they moved it to Suffield,
Mm-hmm.
the nurses building headquarters.
Yeah.
Remember when the nursing center was there?
Yeah. Visiting nurse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was across what now is the St. Mary's Parish Center. That was where the town hall, that was the town hall.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And the high school was across the street, the grade school, and the nurses' main building was there. So everything started to get too big for what it needed to do, so they built the high school up on the other side of School Street. And the St. Mary's took over the town hall, and the town hall moved into the high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it worked pretty good for everybody. So where do you want to go from here?
Well, how about doctors in town? Did you, family doctors, were they local or out of town? Who do you remember?
Dr. Elbergas was the prime house doctor. And his office was well, the buildings are gone now, where the telephone company was right beside it was a big brick building.
On Spring Street?
On Spring Street, down at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And before they tore down the whole front where the theater was, and the National Bank was there.
Yeah, I've seen photographs of the old Main Street.
Yeah,
What do you remember about what businesses were there?
Well, the theater was there, and on the other side of Spring Street was a shoe store, and a drugstore was there. And there was a small shop, grocery shop, that was there. And there was there was an electronics store there too.
Mm-hmm.
There was. Do you remember that?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Do you remember Marconi's?
Yeah, Marconi's.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were quite a well-known name in town.
Yeah. And then further north, there was an A&P.
Yeah, yeah. The AMP store, yeah.
Yeah.
And you parked out in the street
Yeah.
because you went off the sidewalk right into the door of the store.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody parked out in the street.
Did you ever take a train from the old train station?
Sure, sure. The one that's up in the middle of town.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're still renovating it or doing something.
Yeah. Where would you take a train ride to back in those days?
We would go to, my son was living in Pennsylvania, where he still is, and we would take the train to Philadelphia.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
That was convenient.
yes, very convenient. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And we went a couple other places where we took the train, and we went to Hartford a couple of times to take it, to hop on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Same train station is there today
Mm-hmm.
in Hartford.
Mm-hmm. Union Place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the train station in Windsor Locks downtown, there was no place to park, and people were having a lot of troubles. You know, you got to leave your car for a week someplace, and there's no place to put it. So, but now where they got it, it's kind of inconvenient because there's no covers, but you can park everything up there where the new train stop is. Yeah, on the other side of Main Street.
Yeah.
So,
So when you weren't working during those years, I mean, during the 50s, 60s, 70s, before you retired, aside from working, did you and your wife participate in any other activities in town?
I belonged to the American Legion,
Mm.
and she joined the auxiliary. And I'm a disabled war veteran, and they help you a lot of times when you're having troubles with the government's procedures and that. So I joined the DAV,
Mm-hmm.
and they always are a big help to you. And so, but I was going to join the VFW, but they had the same meetings, same time as the American Legion. So I didn't join the VFW, I belonged to the Legion, and was active in it. And at one point, I forget the year, I was the patrol leader in the Memorial Day Parade. And then the next election, I was elected commander of the
Oh,
Gente Viola post.
yeah.
So I was the American Legion commander for a year. Yeah,
Would that have been in the 1960s?
60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, around there.
And where did the Legion meet in those days? Did you have?
The Gente Viola post in that big gray building on the corner of Elm Street and Main Street.
Memorial Hall.
Memorial Hall.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 And then later on, they built another hall for the American Legion.
Yes, on Elm Street. But it was too much to maintain,
Hmm.
to try to keep up, and the outside lawn and everything. So they moved back. They stayed there for a couple of years, Then they moved back to Memorial Hall,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still there.
Yeah.
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 And it's adequate parking.
Oh, yeah.
The only problem, to go up to the meeting room, or the large room, is a big, have you ever been there?
Oh, yes.
Oh, the big circular staircase.
Yeah.
And as guys grew older, a lot of them can't go up there, and they don't want to come down something like that. Yeah, I know guys who will go into the building and have a small meeting downstairs, but they can't go upstairs because they can't come down safely.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the Memorial Day Parade. Do you remember the route, the street route?
Yeah, down Main Street.
Just down Main?
It was formed up at the other end. Remember where Dr. Cornelia had his office?
Whereabouts was that?
Right about there. And the band would start there, and I would be out in the front. And we'd start the parade there, go down and around the corner, and down onto Main Street. And the whole parade would walk down to Memorial Hall. Then we would continue to go up to the cemetery. Then we went to St. Mary's Cemetery. It was those who wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it was difficult with cars because you couldn't park in the road. And I guess a lot of guys didn't want to park all the way up at the other end of the cemetery and then walk all the way down where the ceremony was held. So, but anyway, that's where we still go today
Mm-hmm.
on Memorial Day to both cemeteries.
Mm-hmm.
The one that's up further, up Main Street on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's big.
Grove Cemetery?
The Grove Cemetery,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been in recent Memorial Day parades? Recently?
Maybe 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I've stopped now. I go down, I have my uniform on, and I go down, but I don't go into the parade. I'm just there at the end for the celebration
At the Memorial Hall?
at Memorial Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody, after a while, the VFW opens their place, and we all go to the VFW hall up Main Street,
Fairview.
Fairview
Yeah,
Street.
off of
Yeah,
North Main there.
it's a dead end out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they have the parades every year.
Great tradition.
Yeah. It's good to be part of an organization like that, that you can relate to the other people that are there with you, rather than being someplace on Memorial Day or whatever, and nobody besides you has ever been in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm not going to be in the parade, so I bring a lawn chair and I sit out in front of St. Mary's, and the parade goes by down to goes down Spring Street to Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I go from there, I go to Memorial Hall.
Yeah.
Do you know Ed Sabatka?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His wife just recently had a heart operation.
Yeah.
She had a valve, something done, just a few days ago.
Yeah.
And the last time I saw her, she seemed to be all right.
Mm.
She didn't say anything wrong.
Well, I saw Ed at the Veterans Day luncheon. You were
Oh,
there.
yeah?
Were you at the Veterans Day
Yes.
luncheon?
Yes,
Do you go every year?
yeah, I was there. I don't remember seeing you, were you?
Well, I was there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me about the luncheons, the Veterans Day celebrations in town.
It's good. they have a structure made up for the intents of everybody, which really doesn't apply to everybody. For the first selectman and others to get up and give a talk, be all right to say, you know, welcome here and all that, and then sit down, somebody else get up, rather than have all of them giving long talks.
Yeah,
After you ate, you're sitting there,
yeah,
because it's not even proper to get up
yeah,
to go to the bathroom
yeah.
with them up there in front of the microphone.
Well, they're probably not the only ones that want to express their gratitude to veterans.
Yeah,
There's probably a long line of people that would like to do
Yeah,
that too.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Windsor Locks, I think, has always done a great job of
yeah,
respecting and honoring veterans.
yeah. And the senior center gave me a nice pillow with the Marine Corps emblem all on the outside. And she called me, gee, what you wonder what she wants? And she hands me this. And I said, oh, wow, hey, this is great. Where'd you get this? I said, we made it for you. We knew you were coming. Okay,
That's nice.
great. So, and I use it to this day.
Wonderful.
It's very nice, and it's big, and it's fluffy, with the Marine Corps emblem on the front.
Does
The
it
whole
have the
bit.
motto?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember seeing it?
I've seen the emblem, sure. I haven't
Yeah.
seen your pillow.
Did you see the pillow that was there?
No.
No?
No.
No.
Yeah, they used to have the Veterans Day celebration here at the senior center, but now they have it out at St. Robert's
Yes.
Hall, Parish Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it because it's bigger?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The crowd keeps getting bigger every year.
Yeah. I've gone to the Veterans Day celebrations here, and the room, they would have a portable viewing stand, and they couldn't accomplish everybody who wanted to go sit on it,
Right.
and everybody was kind of packed in chairs and tables, yeah. But we were there, we enjoyed it,
That's good.
other guys. But St. Mary's Hall is bigger to accommodate more people more comfortably and more easily, so. It's all right, and the parking is easy, so.
Anything you want to talk about in terms of churches that you would maybe belong to, or
I belong to my grandparents.
same church?
My grandfather was one of the people who helped construct St. Mary's.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Your grandfather?
my grandfather, and a horse and wagon brought all the, was in 1860 something, and they brought all the building gear on a wagon to the area where the church was going to be built, and they unhooked the horses and took the horse off to wet the horses to go get something else, and they left this great big thing there all full of all these
Building
construction
materials.
projects.
Yeah.
But nothing until then was built other than facing the Connecticut River. So because if you're facing, you could see Indians if they're coming up to steal things. But the church equipment, all the building equipment, all of it just about, was in wagons with horses. And they got it pointing the other way, because that's where the guy that was driving the horses had them stop. They unhooked it and went off with the horses, and just the wagon was there with everything on it. So the guys took it off and started building the church, and it's facing the other way. And if you look all around there, most of the buildings are all facing the river, except the ones that are built along after the church. the priest after St. Mary's was designated, the third house is where the priest used to come by a horse, or I think maybe a train, and then a horse to the third house up, and that's where he would stay, because there was no priest was assigned to St. Mary's.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would get on his horse and go back to Boston, and go, however.
Now, is this, are you recalling this from stories your grandfather shared with you, or do you remember that?
No, I read about it. I don't remember him as well as I do my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Grandma Meade. She was very, very pleasant with children. She wanted to impress them, you know, keep them quiet and keep them safe.
Yeah.
Because when we lived in East Windsor Hill, originally it was the Hartford Seminary. There were two great big brick buildings. The seminary was facing them. The building on the left was the seminary building. The one on the right was the dormitories. And they moved the whole operation to Hartford, and they left the buildings empty. And we moved into the building on the right. My grandparents moved into the building on the right. That was the dormitory. And the other half of it was empty. So we moved into the other side of the building.
Those buildings still there? Those buildings are still there?
No, the student building is I think that's gone, but the other one is still there.
Oh.
They took the other one down.
So back to Windsor Locks, and at the point where you decided to retire, which I think you said was around 1976 or so, that opened a new chapter in your life, retirement.
Yeah.
Want to tell me a little bit about your retirement? What you've been doing during that time, and what any of your interests or hobbies?
I would take care of the lawn, and like even this time of year, and nobody had somebody come to do it. You did it yourself. And didn't have a snow blower, had a couple of shovels. But the driveways weren't paved at that time, they were all gravel. And there was no mail delivered. Along Old County Road was a whole row of poles, and there was a mailbox on top of one, and that's where one of the boxes was for your house, and that's where the mail was left. There was no delivery to houses. When eventually they did, they took all the poles down, and little things like that, where they changed things for everybody. And then they paved, or they gave the opportunity to come, and they're gonna, a few years later, they would pave your driveway, because the gravel was getting spread all over everything. We stuck on the wheels, down the street, and everything else. But that's the way things were.
So I know that you spend some of your time in retirement visiting the Windsor Locks Senior Center, right?
Yes, but it wasn't here, I don't think. No, it wasn't. This was a fire department. And I don't know, there was one section of it was a jail. As you look at the building from the street, on the right, that was the police station, and the fire station and the fire department was on the left. And the building, the part of the building on the right was a jail. There were a couple of guys, they were caught drunk, and they were put into jail, and it was here, this building.
So how about any sporting activities, hobbies like fishing or outdoor activities that you enjoyed in your retirement?
No, I have an antique automobile.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I have a 1950 Singer Roadster. It's an English car. Steering wheel's on the right. You shift with your left hand.
What year is it?
It's a 1950.
You still have it?
Yeah, oh yeah, still got it.
So you've worked on it?
I don't have to work on it. I got it. It's running in prime condition, but I keep tinkering with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, change the oil and filter, and the brakes were all mechanical to check that all the pivot points and everything. And I had a 1927 Buick that I kept there too, and I kept that all in good condition. And then eventually, my lovely wife wanted her own car, because when I would go to work, she couldn't go to the store to get anything, because there wasn't any near us then. So she wanted her own car. So we went and bought her own car. And then she got a job at the school, on South School.
Mm-hmm.
She worked there for a few years. She was in the kitchen and a substitute teacher.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and I was at home most of the time when I was retired,
Yeah.
tinkering with, there was always something to do with one of the cars, or do something outdoors in the
Yeah.
lawn,
Yeah.
and in the house. And the upstairs was just vacant. So then we got a company to come to build on upstairs, you know, lift up the roof
Oh, yes.
and build the whole inside. And that worked out just right. Then I have my children were able to get their own rooms.
Nice.
So that worked out pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other houses, they did the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Raise the roof.
You raise the roof, yeah,
Yeah.
in the back, then build the rooms on the inside.
So now, the kids, your children, they've given you grandchildren?
My grandchildren, some of them live, one of them lives in Suffield,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of them all live someplace else.
How many grandchildren do you have?
Well, golly, I'll have to count. I got 4. Derek and Ron and Steve, because they all live in, not all of them, but
Yeah.
my one grandson lives in, he wanted to stay in this area, so he bought a nice house in Suffield.
Nice.
My other grandson lives in Tampa, Florida. And my oldest son lives on the outskirts of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
He's a convoy driver for the Veterans Administration.
Wow. Wow.
And he drives veterans to hospital visits and all that.
Yeah. Well, now I won't ask you how many great-grandchildren you have, but do you have any?
I've got 3 or 4 grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren. Wonderful.
Great-grandchildren,
Wonderful.
yeah. My grandson has 2 boys in Tampa, and I have another grandson that lives in Coral Springs, Florida.
Yeah. I hope you get down to visit them sometimes, do you?
Once in a while we do.
Good, good.
They come up here more than we go down there.
Yeah, good. Now, you mentioned to me earlier that one of your pleasures is reading poetry.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely, though rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. sometimes too hot, the eye of heaven shines a line to time thou owest. May thy eternal beauty ne'er fade, nor lose the gleam thou owest. For as long as men can breathe, and eyes can see, so long live this, and may this bring long life to thee. Did you ever read that?
Beautiful, beautiful.
It's the second scene of the second act of Romeo and Juliet.
Mm.
Then the other is hark, what light through yonder window breaks? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Is the first and second scenes of Romeo and Juliet.
So you read Shakespeare,
I like to read Shakespeare.
and you memorize a little bit too.
And, yeah, it's easy to remember something that you enjoy reading. Yeah.
When did you develop that interest?
When I was in high school,
Oh.
when we had a period in English of just poetry, reading it, and read a little bit of it, and then you close it, they ask you to recite some parts of it that you read. So when you read, you imbibed it into your brain. You know, like I've gone to the Emily Dickinson home. Have you ever been there?
Up in Northampton?
Northampton?
Northampton, yes.
I been up there a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I was there quite a while. I walk a lot, and so I decided to go out for a walk to see the scenery. And I walked down around the corner and up, down another sidewalk. There's a great big cemetery. So I was walking by it. Now look, there's her gravestone. Emily Dickinson.
Yeah. Have you read some of her work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Her house is still a museum
Yeah.
where she lived,
Mm-hmm.
but she never married. She lived there. Her brother lived right next door to her, and there's a path still to this day through the 2 yards where she used to walk to go to his house
Mm-hmm.
and go back to her own house.
Have you ever tried your own hand at writing poetry?
No, not really.
No.
I've read different poems, and I would have utilized different terms,
Mm.
but whatever the person who wrote it, that's what they have in their mind, well, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so. So I don't know.
Well, you're very talented and creative to be able to memorize such long passages from Shakespeare.
Yeah, I can remember them, yeah. I enjoy reading. Poetry. I have books on poetry. And I read some in Latin, because I studied Latin in school. I took it as, I needed another subject. Took math, science, algebra, but I needed 4. Geez, I don't know what other subject to take.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked, Latin.
Can you recite any Latin?
I can, but it's difficult because the Webster English Dictionary has 26,000 words. The Latin dictionary to English has 9,000 words.
Mm.
Because when it ceased to be an accepted language, it never progressed. The English is progressing to this day.
Mm. New words every day.
Words are added with different meanings,
Mm-hmm.
but the Latin language has 9,000 words from 1700 is when it ceased, and there's no other additions to it.
Mm.
But that's what it is, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I enjoy it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So did you you went to high school?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you all about my story later.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, well, we've kind of talked about the full circle of your life. Anything that else you'd like to talk about?
well, when I was in mechanics training school in the Marine Corps at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station, we were there for 7 months. And it was very interesting. School was 8 to 3 every day, and Saturday morning from 8 to 12 was an exam for everything that you were exposed to during the week.
Wow.
And if you failed it, you went back one class. So,
You obviously never failed one.
no, I never did.
I didn't think so.
I spent more time reading.
Yeah.
Other guys would go to the PX or something, you know, afterwards, or go to the club,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I wasn't old enough. You had to be 21 to drink alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of us weren't 21,
Mm-hmm.
so we couldn't. You could go in and sit and have something to eat, but you couldn't sit at the bar and eat, or you couldn't sit at the bar and you couldn't buy anything alcohol. And they were very strict about it.
Wow.
So, but that's the way it was. I didn't care. That's what the law is. That's what we could do. We do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Russ, I'm very grateful for your time
Very good.
and very impressed and
Yeah,
entertained and inspired
yeah.
by your life story.
Do you know where First Street is?
Yes, I do.
There's, there's a house now next to the corner where there's a dark colored house. There's a couple of them, but the first one, they're tall, slender. My grandfather built that. That's where he lived. And other people built the same type of houses.
Ah.
But there was they left a big space for, I don't know if it was for horse and wagons or what,
Mhm.
but not utilized there anymore. So somebody built a modern day house between their house and the street now.
Do you remember going into that house when you were a child?
I think we did, because they used to come to St. Mary's Church,
Mm-hmm.
and they walked.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes my mother and I would go to their house just to visit.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And it's still there.
Yeah, they're still there. It's still there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's still the same color.
Yeah.
And it's got like the covers are squares.
Yeah. Maybe you could go. Maybe you can get a tour someday.
Yeah, something.
It'd be nice to.
And the house beside them was built same style, same
Yeah.
type,
Yeah.
3 stories,
Yeah. That's
but
a
it's
great,
narrow.
That's a great memory.
Yeah,
I'm sure a lot has changed inside it, but
Oh, yeah.
there might be something you'd recall.
yeah. But the people that live there, they like it.
Yeah.
Who live there now? You
Terrific.
know, you have to remember
Have you ever met them?
I've never been in it. I was outside talking to the people.
Oh, you should
That's
invite
all.
yourself in. You
But
should.
like when we lived in South Windsor, there was no running water inside the house. It was
Yeah.
a hand pump,
Yeah.
and there was a hand pump outdoors if you needed more water. And the bathroom was out in the back. It was in a wooden building,
Mm-hmm. Outhouse?
an outhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of them. There's no running water inside houses.
Yeah.
No sinks.
Yeah.
No water.
Well.
Other than a pump into a pail. That's where
Well, there's a lot of things to miss about the old days, but that's
Yeah.
probably not one of them, especially on a cold day.
No.
So you like poetry?
Yes. May your troubles be less, your blessings be more. May nothing but happiness now ever come to your door.
Thank you. That's wonderful.